The cargo freighter Maribel's Run glided through the edge of the Icaran Drift, a stellar graveyard rimmed by cobalt stars and erratic gravitational tides. Her hull was old, but the crew kept her together with patches, prayers, and questionable upgrades from salvage yards in the belt. She was slow, crooked on one side, and her reactor groaned like an old man in the cold, but she had made every single run on time. That counted for something. Inside the ship, fluorescent strips buzzed overhead, bathing the worn-out corridors in an anemic white glow. The mess hall, if it could be called that, had been converted for the evening. Tables pushed together, bags of freeze-dried snacks opened and left half devoured, and a folding projector jury-rigged into the ceiling blinking static until someone got the damn thing to load properly. A handwritten sign taped to the bulkhead read, "Game night D20's mandatory, drinks optional, no rage quitting." Cora Lynn, second engineer and undisputed dungeon master, stood at the head of the table wielding her homemade DM screen like a ceremonial blade. She wore a cardboard crown labeled Queen of Chaos and fingered a set of ancient polyhedral dice like they were holy relics. Her hair was tied up with wire bands, her coveralls smeared with grease, and her smile was pure mischief. "Let's see if Captain Everett finally makes it past the Goblin King without blowing up the tavern this time," she said. Captain Davin Everett, former Earth Navy-turned-interstellar hauler, was sipping something synthetic and dark from a steel cup. His beard was going gray, his knuckles were bruised from recent repairs, and his eyes, though tired, sparked with anticipation. "I told you the tavern was flammable. It's on you for putting a moonshine distillery next to the damn fireplace." "I believe that was a narrative flourish," Cora replied with exaggerated air quotes. "Maybe don't hurl alchemist's fire in a wood building next time." First Mate Rana Malik, towering and deadly with a scar across her temple and a laugh that could shatter nerves, rolled her eyes. "Are we playing, or are we roasting the captain all night?" "Both," Cora said, cracking her knuckles. The rest of the crew gathered: Yoni Turek, the pilot with a love for strategy and a loathing for actual flying; Deeg, the cargo handler and part-time chef who had a knack for improbable dice rolls; and old Marvin, the ship's mechanic, who insisted on playing the same dwarven cleric every campaign, even if the genre was sci-fi, horror, or underwater romance. The projector flickered to life, the night was young, the dice were ready. And that's when the Maribel's Run was hit by a gravity tether. The ship groaned under the sudden force, inertial compensators struggling to reassert control. Food packets flew, drinks splashed. Deeg let out a startled squawk and grabbed his dice like they were precious cargo. Alarms shrieked across the decks as the exterior hull registered forced contact. Rana was the first on her feet. "That's no storm surge, that's a boarding line." Everett stood slowly, his hand on the grip of the fléchette pistol holstered beneath his longcoat. "Looks like someone wants to ruin game night." On the outer hull, magnetic clamps thudded in rhythmic succession. Then came the hissing shriek of a plasma cutter carving a jagged oval into the airlock. "Who the hell boards an unarmed freighter?" Yoni asked, already pulling up the security feeds on a jury-rigged tablet. Static, interference, then a frame flickered clear. The boarders weren't human. They were tall, armored in plates of scavenged alloy and organic carapace. Their faces were hidden behind bone-white masks shaped like screaming skulls. Some held plasma bayonets, others net guns or jagged glaives. All of them bore the jagged crimson insignia of the Varanox Marauders, a species once thought myth, spacefaring pirates said to hail from the silent worlds beyond the spiral reach. The ship's meager defenses had been bypassed like cardboard in a storm. "Varanox," Cora said, blinking. "I thought they only hit corporate convoys." "Looks like they're lowering their standards," Everett muttered. The outer seal blew open with a shriek of hot metal. The pirates poured in like a hunting pack, moving with practiced speed. They were searching for cargo, for bodies, for resistance, but instead of panic, they found something else entirely. The crew was standing in the middle of the mess hall. Unarmed. Unbothered. Cora was still wearing her cardboard crown. Marvin had barely risen from his seat, his old cleric miniature clutched in one hand. Everett leaned against the bulkhead with a coolness that masked the tight coil of readiness beneath. The lead pirate stepped forward. His armor bristled with trophies, shattered helm visors, burned tags, a Terran jawbone mounted at his side. He surveyed them with disdain, then pointed a clawed digit at the table. "What is this?" the alien growled in broken Terran standard. "You mock death." Cora arched an eyebrow and gestured toward the empty seats around the table. "You're just in time for game night," she said. "Ever played Dungeons and Deep Space?" The pirate's mask tilted, confused. His weapon hummed, but he didn't fire. Captain Everett stepped forward, voice calm and direct. You've already boarded, you've already taken our defenses offline, which means you have two choices: loot a half-empty cargo bay and scrap a rust bucket ship, or sit down, roll the dice, and see if you can beat the dungeon boss with your brains instead of your blades. Deeg nodded sagely. We got snacks too. A long silence followed. One of the pirates shifted. Another lowered his weapon slightly, the point of his glaive dipping an inch toward the floor. Cora grinned. Come on, be legends. The lead Varanox tilted his head again, slowly, then he stepped forward and sat. The others hesitated. One by one, unsure, confused, they followed. As they settled at the table, still gripping their weapons, the room filled with strange tension. The air hung between comedy and carnage. No one breathed. Even the ship's lights seemed to dim in anticipation. Cora reached for her dice. All right then, she said, roll for initiative. And in that moment something shifted, not just in the room, not just aboard the Maribel's run, but in the drift, in the dark, in the subtle pulse of history itself. The boarders had come for blood. They stayed for game night. And the war that would come after it, none of them knew it yet, would begin with a nat 20. The dice clattered against the metal table, a symphony of chaos echoing in a room still charged with the tremors of an interrupted ambush. Polyhedrons spun, tumbled, landed. A faint ripple ran through the seated Varanox warriors, an almost imperceptible twitch in their shoulders, a shift in posture, as if the very act of engaging in this ritual challenged something ancient within them. Cora leaned in with theatrical gravity. The chamber is dark, the torch sputters, the smell of brimstone thickens. You stand at the edge of the obsidian maw. Before you lies a puzzle written in shifting alien glyphs. Behind you. She paused, eyeing the pirate who'd sat closest to her. His name, according to a data scan he hadn't realized had been activated, was Voctor. Rank unknown, but his armor's etchings marked him as one of the old blood. His mask, now sitting beside his dice, revealed a face crisscrossed with blue scars and piercing black eyes. There's a cave troll, she finished, and he's getting impatient. Voctor blinked slowly. We slay it. You could, or you could try deciphering the glyphs, opening the escape hatch, and avoiding a battle that might wake the broodmother deeper in. I do not flee. It's not fleeing, it's tactical repositioning, Deeg offered, elbow deep in a bag of vacuum-sealed jelly snacks. Captain Everett sat at the end of the table, arms folded, eyes alert, watching, not the game, the pirates. Every twitch of muscle, every confused glance, every flicker of hesitation. He was mapping them, reading them, not as raiders but as men. As living weapons who had, for the first time perhaps in years, hesitated before killing. Roll, Cora said. The pirate's three-fingered hand closed around the 20-sided die with mechanical precision. He rolled. 18. The table erupted in hoots and slaps on the back. Marvin slammed his mug against the table. He's got the knack, this one. Rana, arms crossed but a smirk playing at her lips, glanced at Everett. What the hell are we doing? He didn't look at her, holding position, letting their curiosity turn inward. Until they remember they're pirates. By then, Everett murmured, they'll want something more than plunder. The game stretched into hours. At first the Varanox had remained silent, half suspicious, as if expecting a hidden trap. Then, as one of their own successfully bartered with a mimic instead of killing it, a strange transformation occurred. They started engaging, whispering strategies in their guttural tongue, making up names for their characters, names like Grax Bonebinder, Commander of Flame, or Silith the Iron-Eyed. They even began to argue, loudly and with sharp gestures, over inventory management and turn orders. One of them slammed a blade down in frustration when his rogue failed a lockpicking roll and set off a trap, only to be shushed by Deeg with a finger to the lips and a glare of pure nerd fury. Cora barely suppressed her laughter. She glanced toward the old intercom panel on the wall, tapping a silent code that activated the internal recorders. If they survived the night, this footage would be the most bizarre first contact documentation in Terran history. Then something shifted again. Midway through the third dungeon chamber, the emergency lights flickered. The ship bugged hard. Grav pull, Yoni said, face paling as she brought up the nav logs. That's not a tether, that's a tractor signature. Heavy scale, multiple sources were being reeled. Corporate, Everett asked. Not unless Telro's fleet corps started flying Ghost-class warships with cloaking nodes. Cora's stomach twisted. You said we were in the drift, right? Who the hell operates cloaked ships in the drift? The answer came seconds later. The Maribel's run was pulled out of the grav stream like a minnow from the shallows. External sensors went blind. The hull temperature dropped sharply. and then the bridge lights turned red as the proximity alert went from yellow to full black. Unidentified capital-scale vessel, unregistered signatures, no comms, no response. Marvin frowned. That's not pirates. No, Everett said quietly, that's something else. Before anyone could respond, the Varanox leader, Voctor, rose from his seat, eyes fixed on the blinking display Yoni had pulled up. He growled a word none of them understood, but the other pirates tensed. What is it? Everett demanded. Voctor pointed toward the sensor readout. The Kethar Dominion, they hunt us, you everything, no warning, no mercy. Kethar, Cora asked, who the hell are they? Voctor's voice was heavy. Silencers of cultures, killers of stories, they erase the will to resist, they erase games. That landed heavier than expected. Yoni looked up from the console. We've got 10 minutes before they breach visual range, their weapons are already hot. The game table stood silent. For the first time, the Varanox didn't look like raiders. They looked like prey that had survived too long. Everett turned to Voctor, then we fight together. Voctor tilted his head, fangs bared. We already play together, war is not much different. He tapped the side of his own neck. A low-frequency burst of encrypted commands spilled into the air. The other pirates began moving, not toward escape pods, not toward weapon lockers, but toward the maintenance corridors. They were preparing for defense. Rana grabbed her sidearm. What's the plan, Cap? Everett nodded to Cora. Bridge is yours. Patch the backup weapons grid, get those mining lasers on manual control. On it. Deeg, secure the cargo. If they breach midship, I want nothing volatile in reach. Don't touch my dice, Deeg shouted over his shoulder. Yoni, override the port shield nodes. Burn the power if you have to. And me? Marvin asked, already limping after them. Everett handed him a toolkit. You're fixing the bloody backup shield grid you swore you patched last week. The old man grunted, knew that come back to bite me. Voctor approached the captain. You would defend a rust bucket ship against erasers of worlds for what? Everett didn't smile because they'd erase the table too. For the first time, Voctor laughed. It was a harsh sound like sand grinding on steel. Then the two men, human and alien, walked together to war. Behind them, the projector still glowed, the game frozen mid-session. The dice waited. The story was far from over. The Maribel's run bristled like a cornered beast, her hull vibrating under the strain of new power loads and systems pushed far beyond their design limits. Within her bones, engineers and pirates worked side by side, jury-rigging circuits, hauling power cells, rerouting fuel lines with the urgency of condemned men rewriting fate. From the bridge, Cora sat at the helm's override station, surrounded by flickering schematics and console readouts smeared with the grime of her gloves. Her hands moved fast, bypassing safeties, overcharging shield relays and feeding the mining lasers, never meant for combat, with reactor juice meant for interstellar jump drives. She didn't look up as she shouted into the shipwide comms, if you're not bracing or firing, get the hell out of the corridors. Yoni's voice came in tight and breathless. Starboard shielding is holding, barely, portside still vulnerable. The Kethar are circling, probing with passive scans, they know we're improvising. They haven't fired yet. They're watching. On the forward view screen, the Kethar Dominion ship finally emerged from its veil. It was massive. Not in brute industrial size like Terran dreadnoughts, but in its symmetry, its horrifying elegance. It looked like a blade forged from obsidian and black light, its surface alive with shifting script that glowed faintly in ultraviolet. No running lights, no windows, just a prow shaped like a splitting atom aimed directly at the freighter's heart. Inside the mess hall-turned battle camp, Everett stood beside Voctor and Rana, scanning a real-time tactical display stitched together from sensor fragments and best guesses. They outmass us by a factor of 80, Rana said, and their weapons are designed to unravel molecular cohesion, not just blast holes. Voctor didn't blink, then we fight with that which they cannot unravel. Everett glanced sideways, culture. Joys. The rest of the Varanox pirates were busy. Weapons stripped from their ship, still docked by a tether, were being mounted into structural hardpoints on the Maribel's spine. One of them had torn out a coolant pump to fit a flechette turret into a ventilation shaft. Another had linked their biohelmets to the freighter's internal comm system, patching in a secondary language network that translated in near real time. It wasn't smooth, but it was working. Down in engineering, Marvin was hunched over the backup shielding nodes, sweat soaking through his collar as his fingers danced through flickering sparks. "Come on, you old bastard," he muttered to the ship. "One more miracle for game night." Deeg and two Varanox were dragging sealed cargo pods toward the external maintenance ports, not to jettison them, but to stack them into ad hoc armor plating. "What's in these?" one of the aliens asked, grunting under the weight. "Seasoning packets and mood stabilizers," Deeg replied. "You'd be amazed how flammable hope is." Then came the first blow. No flash, no explosion, just a pulse. The Kethar fired something silent, invisible. It hit the Maribel's run amidships and crawled across her hull like a spiderweb of non-existence. Everything it touched began to flake, corrode, and vanish, as if removed from the idea of matter itself. "Return fire," Everett barked. The mining laser spat molten light. The turrets scavenged from the pirate craft opened up with slugs in plasma bursts. They didn't expect to destroy the enemy ship. That was impossible. But they expected to be heard. Inside the Kethar vessel, if such a place could be said to have an interior, the sentient hive at its core detected deviation, resistance, not military precision, not expected surrender, improvisation, collaboration, insult. "So it spoke." A voice echoed inside the minds of every sentient on board the Maribel's run, a pure tone, clear and cold. "You are fragmented, unaligned, culturally incoherent. You will submit to deletion." Cora spat oil from her lip and slammed a control node. "Tell that to the game board." The message came again. "You are not a civilization, you are noise." And Everett stepped forward into the bridge's command chair, facing the incoming ship, with blood on his collar and calm in his voice. "We are the game," he said, "and we write the rules." He hit the override. External comm relays powered up, an archaic, laughably primitive form of communication. No encryption, no carrier waves, just signal, just volume. And the feed that broadcast into the void was the game. Not a battle cry, not a threat, but Cora's voice narrating a campaign in progress. "You stand at the final gate, a creature of erasure waits beyond. It offers no terms, no riddles, only silence. What do you do?" Voctor's voice, solemn and low, came next. "I opened the gates." The Kethar ship paused. It didn't fire again. It had encountered Terran ships before, fledgling colonies, defense drones, AI battle stations, all predictable, all subjugated. This was story. Uncontrolled, erratic, contagious. Within the enemy vessel, logic matrices rerouted, predictive protocols failed, for in the face of erasure, the humans had responded not with terror but with play, with fiction, with choice. The Varanox had known war, but they had never known game night. The silence that followed was not peace, it was analysis. Aboard the Maribel, Yoni whispered, "They're hesitating." Rana nodded, "That's our chance, hit them now or run." Everett clenched his fists, "Neither." He turned to Voctor. "We board them." The alien looked at him in stunned silence. "You want to invade the Kethar. They won't expect a counteroffensive from a freighter with duct-taped turrets and a crew of dice-slinging lunatics. That's why it'll work. We'll die. Maybe, but they'll know the name of the ship that made them blink." Cora tapped into the enemy ship's tether. "I can splice in a power surge, overload their docking nodes, give you an opening." Everett looked across his people. And then beyond to the Varanox. "Suit up, bring dice." Rana lifted a plasma rifle from the wall and cocked it. "You're serious." "We're going to make them play." Within minutes, a boarding party formed, humans and Varanox alike, not with matching armor or coordinated insignia, but with symbols scrawled in chalk, in ink, in blood, dice rolls, character names, miniatures clipped to shoulders. It wasn't war paint. It was identity. As the Kethar ship reeled in its tether to consume them whole, the Maribel's run did the unthinkable. She pulled forward, toward the enemy, into the darkness, toward the next chapter. And for the first time in recorded history, a boarding assault began with a dice roll. Inside the void, the gods of control trembled. The docking corridor screamed with atmospheric compression as the Maribel's run slammed against the Kethar vessel, coupling not through diplomacy or alignment, but through brute override of grav clamps and raw improvisation. For a brief second, the two ships, one ancient, stubborn and patched together with human desperation and alien ingenuity, the other sleek and incomprehensible, were joined. The Kethar ship's hull resisted intrusion. Its surface wasn't metal, it was grown. a kind of living alloy that rejected foreign code, mimicked dead frequencies, and tried to overwrite input commands with null signatures. Cora had expected that. Which is why she didn't send code. She sent music. Specifically, a bootleg audio stream of Deeg's campaign playlist, a chaotic blend of 20th century jazz, post-earth synthcore, and something labeled or cop, sliced into fragments and fed as corrupted packets through every handshake protocol she could spoof. The Cathar defenses flickered. The hull responded with pulses, not aggression, not yet. Confusion. Cora leaned over the comms mic. You've been invited to participate in this session. Consent is assumed. The airlock burst open. Everett led the charge. His boots hit alien floor that squirmed underfoot, the black corridors lit by ultraviolet veins that recoiled from Terran biology. Behind him came Rana, armored in repurposed hull plating and wielding a modified plasma welder. Voctor and 2 other Varanox followed, moving in tight formation, their bone masks worn openly now, not to intimidate, but to remind the enemy of what they were not. They were not quiet. They were not obedient. They were not predictable. The interior of the Cathar vessel shifted constantly, walls stretching and narrowing, corridors breathing, light pulsing in unnatural rhythm. No maps could be drawn, no logic applied. This isn't a ship, Rana said, it's a maze. Voctor nodded, it learns as it hunts. But games are mazes too, Everett said. The trick is not to win, it's to change the rules. They advanced deeper, weapons ready. No sign of resistance yet, only movement at the edges of vision, walls adjusting, shapes scuttling above, pulses of bioluminescence fading when observed. The ship was watching them, but not killing them. Not yet. Yoni's voice crackled over the comms, barely getting through the static. You're being tracked, whatever this thing is, it's rerouting power around your movement. We're reading energy patterns similar to neural responses, like it's cataloging what you're doing. Let it watch, Everett replied. They passed what looked like a chamber of crystalline stalks, humming faintly. Cora's voice came through the static. You're near the core, but we're picking up strange interference, something emotional. The Varanox gear is reading biochemical shifts in the environment. The ship isn't just watching, it's reacting. Everett stopped. He stepped forward alone toward a central alcove. There, rising like a throne, was an interface node, spiraling, glass-like, flickering with residual thoughts. He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the surface, a shockwave of presence hit his mind. Not words. Not language. Concepts brutal and raw. Containment, compliance, culture suppression, narrative elimination, memory overwrite. He pushed back. Imagination, volition, randomization, defiance, play. The node rippled. Rana shouted something coming. Out of the walls, Cathar forms uncoiled. They weren't soldiers. They were extensions of the ship's will, limbed constructs made of phase metal and bioflesh, shifting with every second. Faceless, purpose-built. Everett raised his weapon. But Voctor stepped forward first. Let me speak. He dropped his weapon, raised his hand. And from his satchel he pulled out a weathered, scratched die, a Varanox-made polyhedral, forged from a tooth of a gas giant predator. He tossed it onto the alien floor. It spun, tumbled, landed. The constructs hesitated. Voctor spoke in a guttural, resonant voice not meant for human ears. I offer this moment not in challenge but in story. The ship heard him, and it answered. A shape formed in the node's center, an avatar, semi-humanoid, sculpted from refracted light and coded aggression. It hovered in place, featureless, waiting. Rana stepped up beside Voctor and Everett. So this is the dungeon boss. Or the DM, Everett muttered. The avatar pulsed with light. And then it rolled. A sphere of black and red rotated in midair, a perfect 20-sided object, emblazoned with glyphs not yet translated. Deeg's voice broke through on the comms. That's a D20, I'd bet my last snack bar on it. Cora's breath caught. They're trying to understand. Then let's teach them. Everett reached into his own pouch, pulled out his die, tossed it in response. It clacked to the floor beside the alien one. 16. The Cathar die rolled again. This time a glyph shimmered and translated mid-spin. Persuasion. Everett nodded. Story duel. And so it began. Not with blasters. Not with torpedoes, but with dice and choices. Each round, the ship responded to narrative cues. The boarding party took turns describing their campaign, how the crew of the Maribel's Run, a ragtag band of outcasts and haulers, faced down extinction not with fleets but with fables. How the Varanox, born of violence, found expression in uncertainty. How the game night offered not strategy but spirit. They rolled. The Kethar responded. And with each exchange, the ship weakened. Not physically, but conceptually. The Kethar were creatures of control. Their power came from certainty, from suppressing deviation. But here, inside their own vessel, an unplanned narrative had taken root. One they couldn't predict. One they couldn't end. Suddenly the Avatar flared, screeched a nonverbal signal, and lashed out. A wave of kinetic force slammed into Everett and the others, knocking them back. Walls sealed, corridors folded. The game was ending. The ship was rejecting the paradox. Back on the Maribel, Cora screamed over comms, "You've got a minute before that section seals for good." Everett staggered to his feet, eyes bloodshot, ribs cracked. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his character sheet, dog-eared, stained, real. He shouted into the core. "I choose to continue, my party chooses to continue. Roll or destroy us, but you will not end the story here. That's not how this campaign ends." Voctor's voice thundered beside him. "We are not prey." And Rana, teeth gritted, bleeding from the scalp, raised her voice too. "We are the players." They rolled. Together. 3 dice. 3 cultures. 3 hopes. The Kethar core flared with rejection, then paused. 20. 19. 20. The ship convulsed. Every corridor screamed in pain or release. And the walls began to collapse. Not implode. Reform. The architecture shifted. It opened new paths, grew new symbols. Lights changed. Not red. Not black. But color. The ship was learning. The Kethar were adapting. Not erasing. Integrating. The boarding party stood in the chamber, barely alive, barely comprehending. Then the Avatar knelt. And rolled again. The game continued. Not won. Not lost. Continued. And far above, in orbit of the drift, a new signal went out. Not a call for conquest. A call for campaign. To be continued. The Maribel's Run hung motionless in orbit over the Icaran drift, a scarred silhouette against a roiling sea of fractured stars. Her hull bore the wounds of the clash, carbon-scored and pitted cargo containers still fused to her flanks like armored scales. But her lights burned steady now, gold and soft blue, and her systems, once strained and clashing, pulsed in synchrony. She was still a freighter. But she was no longer just that. In the command chamber of the Kethar vessel, now transformed into something neither wholly alien nor familiar, the dice rolled again. This time it was Deeg's turn. He squatted on a reformed growth of the vessel's inner surface, his fingers sticky with jelly snack residue, squinting at the weird translucent dye the ship had created for him. The glyphs had changed, become readable. They now mirrored the Terran standard alphabet, warped slightly by Kethar aesthetics. He rolled. A 12. Not bad. He grinned up at the newly reshaped avatar across from him, a fusion of light and logic, humanoid now in vague approximation of Everett's build, as if the Kethar were trying to show respect through imitation. "I seduce the goblin priestess with my collection of rare seasonings and deeply sensitive poetry," Deeg declared. The avatar froze, then rolled its die. A 1. Deeg exploded in laughter, flopping backward. Critical fail, she hits you with a ladle, mate, respectfully declines your advances. Voctor growled something in his native tongue that, judging by Cora's translator patch, came out as, "Why is this part of the story?" "Because," Marvin said as he passed by, limping, "sometimes even gods need comic relief." The chamber itself had become a meeting place, not a throne room, not a control center. A table had formed from the ship's material, glistening, warm, and flexible, surrounded by seating shaped for multiple physiologies. The Kethar vessel had begun learning from them, reshaping itself not just in structure but in philosophy. Not to appease. To participate. The original crew of the Maribel's Run and the Varanox pirates remained aboard as guests, diplomats, or maybe something more complicated. They were teaching the Kethar how to campaign. Everett sat with Voctor near one edge of the table, looking over something the ship had produced the previous day, a diagram of a new kind of vessel. One part freighter, one part warship, one part mobile cultural platform. It was bizarre, beautiful. Unity class, Everett said softly. They want to name it after us. Voctor turned the translucent schematic, studying the curves and strange harmonics. They asked me to provide guidance on the weapon systems, he said. Instead, I gave them dice. And they accepted. No, they asked for more. Everett nodded. Yoni and Rana were down in the lower decks, assisting the Kethar with something extraordinary. With each roll, each session, the alien hive mind was learning unpredictability, learning to generate narrative strands it didn't command but allowed. It had begun building simulation chambers, not for training. For story. Once a civilization built on certainty, the Kethar were now diving into the chaos of storytelling, and through it, rediscovering something they had long ago excised from themselves. Doubt, imagination, curiosity. Everett took a long sip from a now steaming mug of actual brewed coffee, compliments of a diplomatic envoy from a Terran trade station, who'd arrived 2 days earlier in a warship and left in stunned silence after witnessing an alien intelligence engaged in cooperative narrative construction. The Galactic Council was in chaos. Of course it was. A rogue freighter captain and a gang of pirates had somehow catalyzed an ideological shift in one of the oldest and most feared annihilation fleets in the galaxy. Already, reports of Kethar ceasefires were spreading. Ships once known for vaporizing orbital habitats were now sending encrypted invitations. Roll initiative, bring SNACKS. Everett smirked at the absurdity of it. And yet here they were. The comms pinged, Cora's voice crackled in. Cap, we've got incoming, not hostile. Another Varanox ship just decloaked. It's broadcasting game logs and requesting a session merge. Voctor stiffened slightly. They are mine. Everett arched a brow. Yours. They were exiled, saw what we did, followed. Everett rose. Then let's welcome them. We've got room at the table. Later that evening, the crew gathered once again around the transformed chamber. There was laughter, debate, arguments over loot distribution and how to interpret vague spell mechanics. Even the Kethar had begun to express individuality, not personalities as humans knew them, but recognizable patterns of divergence. Slight tonal shifts in how they described their characters, preferences for tactics, preferences for humor. The campaign world was growing. What began as a one-shot dungeon crawl had expanded into a persistent narrative, shaped by contributions from human, Varanox, and Kethar alike. Whole constellations were being reimagined as mythical zones, wildlands, neutral zones of play. Factions rose, fell, rebalanced. There were losses, too. Marvin passed quietly in his sleep 3 days after the alliance formalized. The ship, recognizing the weight of the moment, converted one of its stasis chambers into a memorial. Cora had etched into the surface, he never missed a game night. His character sheet was still passed around, still played. Still rolled for. The universe had changed. Not with fire. Not with conquest. But with dice. Somewhere deep within Kethar subspace, a transmission pulsed out into the void, encoded with narrative complexity, cultural variance, and strategic paradox. A challenge. A story. And on distant, unknown worlds, other empires paused, watched, considered. Because now there was a game being played. And if they did not understand the rules, they risked being left behind. Humanity had not won a war. They had started a campaign. And it was only just the beginning.